Welcome, everybody. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on wherever you're joining us from. Welcome, my dear panelists. I will formally introduce you in a while. We're giving a couple of minutes to people to join. This is a webinar that will be discussing about predictive technologies. And it's one of my favorite topics, and it's one of the most heated conversations that I'm having with people in the industry. So I was really looking forward to having this opportunity to have this session with you. What are we going to do and why? Let me start introducing you to today's webinar. This is a conversation that I remember starting back in 2021. We were holding a panel at the GFSI event that was right after or during the COVID lockdowns, and we started with a session that was discussing about ways in which we could introduce AI and predictive analytics in food risk prevention. And here we are now, almost 4 years later, and we have seen an acceleration of deployments and even some technologies that I think we didn't expect to see as much popular as we see them right now. All these applications, this chatbot and chat-related applications to help people interact with massive amounts of knowledge. I think right now we are witnessing a transformation that is really, really fast and is really, really changing different industries. What I hear in other sectors, like the creative industries, is that this is the type of transformation that is putting people out of jobs, or changing completely the requirements of hiring people for different roles. So I'm here with the dear panelists to discuss a little bit about what we see and to also be very practical. What are we going to cover? Something that we also see regulators and authorities adopting as a technology. One of my favorite examples is something that we were discussing in a fireside chat with Donald Prater from the US FDA, is this pilot that started back in 2019 as one of the small-scale pilots of the FDA with data and machine learning algorithms, trying to highlight risky imports of seafood. And right now you see this heavily deployed and used in all the importing ports of the United States, where they're using this system, the Predict system, to identify where, in which import load and shipment the risk is higher. And this is really actually supporting FDA officers in taking decisions. And we are talking about a transformation that is taking place in different layers. Yes, there is the AI modeling component and all the technological part that really enables this kind of transformation. But we are also looking at the transformation into the way that data and all the available knowledge or information that is out there is being aggregated, combined, and used to train such models or to train them and facilitate the interaction and the discovery of information through these models. And of course, the front-end applications, the software systems that are the ones that support the decisions of people, the interfaces that are allowing the interaction of humans with these technologies. So in the case of ChatGPT, it's the chatting part, the natural language communication and conversation that really is the innovative front-end interface of all the beauty that is hidden behind. So I see these three areas and the evolution of technology in these three areas as being core in the transformation that we will be covering today. So what is this webinar about and who is this for? Well, I hear a lot the question every time that I'm having a conversation with someone in the food industry. I would say regardless of whether they already use AI technologies or not, whether they have already started this journey or they are considering an investment, they are still looking around and trying to understand what others are doing, what are their peers doing in the industry, what are the other players using and in which ways. They still want to see and hear about very, very practical examples and applications that may add value in their work. And they are looking not only for the promise, the benefits, but also for the challenges, the pitfalls. That's why we took the decision to set up this panel and discuss exactly about these things. And I have the pleasure and honor to have Geert and Giannis with me. I will ask you for a brief introduction, so I will not introduce you guys formally. First of all, Geert, coming from Veeva, tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you, Nikos. Thank you for having me in this webinar. And I think this is a fantastic topic to have a conversation about. And I think it is very topical. It is on the mind of the industry. My name is Geert Van Kempen. I'm the head of Food and Beverage Strategy at Veeva Systems, a provider of cloud-based quality systems. I come from the industry. I spent most of my career prior to Veeva at Unilever Foods. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And one of the AI techies in his heart, Giannis, tell us a little bit about you.
It's great that I'm here today. So thank you very much for inviting me in this very interesting webinar. Yeah, I come from the technology point of view. But I feel very lucky that for many years I'm working very closely to the people in the food companies that are responsible to have safe foods on our plates. So this is a very big school for me, because from a lover of what technology can do, I am now a big fan and a lover of how technology can be impactful. So either this is big data, or this is semantics, or this is blockchain, or this is AI. I understood that the most important thing is this technology to be impactful. So that's why I'm very interested in the discussion that we will have today.
And Nikos, if I may, I fully agree with you, Giannis. I think also our company sees technology as a major enabler for helping the industry with food safety and increasing food safety, and we've expressed that as a road towards flawless food safety where technology really can help. And I think that's how that can help is very much the topic of this webinar. So again, thank you for having me.
Exactly. And this is the starting challenge that I want to put on the table, that we are trying to introduce an innovative technology or set of technologies and applications in people that have something else as the priority. They are not doing technology for a living. They are trying to ensure that nothing will go wrong with the foods that they are either processing or manufacturing or packaging or distributing. And then you're trying to convince and show to such an audience that yet another innovation will actually help them and not distract them from what they're doing. So this is a great starting point for our session. I would love to know, not I would like, I would love to know what brought our audience here. So we have a small poll, very quick poll here that I would like our audience to answer. What got you here? What is the area that you find more interesting? Does it have to do with the data part of it, the modeling part of it? Is it about data per se, about the AI models and technologies, or the decision support software applications? Give us a bit of a feeling of what you would find more interesting. And I see the predictive models being very popular in our audience. And data today seems to be less interesting. Okay. We will work with that. I will share the results. So the majority of who we have here is here for the models per se, the technologies, but also for the software applications. Let's start it. Now I get a better understanding, and I want to put a disclaimer here for all of us that adopting any technology and adopting this kind of technology as well can take place in different ways. It might be that parts of it or all of it is being implemented in-house, which means that someone has to find and hire, develop, grow, align the capabilities in-house, or someone has to find, select, evaluate, select, and then trust, and again align and integrate such a solution from a third party, or a combination of both. And it can be a centralized top-down initiative, or it may be a distributed bottom-up approach where teams can choose their own way of going and their own tools to be using. And there will be always the ones that wait what is proven. And I will come back to this closer to the end of our session. So we are talking not only about the journey per se, but about the different paths that an organization may follow to implement such technologies. Plus, there are several pitfalls, I would say, several challenges. My favorite one is number one, having the technology guys running the show, forgetting about the real problems that have to be addressed, the actual daily decisions that have to be supported, and having fun with the technology for the sake of technology. Or, and this might be relevant to offerings like the ones that you guys are bringing, the two companies are bringing in an organization, there might be solutions that are coming from third parties that are really incompatible, disconnected, in some cases even overlapping and competing, which is very typical in deployment scenarios. I really like autonomy and independence, and I really like teams that start playing with such tools on their own, but this can very quickly go off track. So it might lead to a misalignment to the strategy that the organization has, and it's a very delicate balance there. And I have seen many, many cases in which internal projects and initiatives start, they consume resources, they consume money, they run for years. They are a little bit far away from completion and delivering something that is more than a proof of concept. And at the end of the day, someone is tired of spending money in a project that doesn't fly and kills the initiative. So I don't think that I'm describing here something that you haven't seen or heard before. With all this in mind, what I want us to focus on right now is, I would say, very, very practical. So if we move on, I would like us to keep a very practical mindset. And the reason for this webinar was when I saw this post of yours, Geert, a few months ago, where you brought this practical perspective from the conversation, from the forum that you had with your clients. So what did they say? What was their view of such a journey? Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, of course, Nikos, and yes, I think this post and this picture actually was the trigger of you inviting me to this webinar. Intrigued by, I think, the conversation we had at our summit in New York last year about the predictive state and what is the future of food safety, and how does it help to bring the state of art in food safety forward. So as Veeva, we organize summits where we intend to bring the industry together and provide an opportunity for the industry to have conversations around topics that are important to the industry. So we organized last year one in Europe, one in North America. We brought customers, but also other companies of the industry to our summit, again, for the purpose of creating shared insights, discussing how their point of view on the industry. And I was fortunate enough to lead twice a panel on what does a predictive state for food safety bring? Is it the future of food safety management? So I was fortunate enough to have those conversations with people from Nestle, from Mondelez, from Mars, from Pepsi. And on this slide, you see a nice visual sketch, a visual representation of the conversation we had in New York. If I can summarize what I've heard from the participants, first of all, a predictive state is very much on topic, on their minds. They see the ability to have more understanding of what is coming as a real enabler to improve the way food safety can be managed. From a more reactive point of view, looking at results rather than can those data, can that all tell us something on where we are maybe at higher risk of something going wrong. So again, very much predictive state is a vision, and they see it as a journey to get there. I think also most of these companies see they cannot do it alone. If you think you can do it alone, you're probably not looking at the problem big enough. So you see several companies realizing that and working together. And as food safety is, in this case, fortunately, seen by the industry as an area of non-compete, it fosters this kind of collaboration. It is to the benefit of the whole industry if data is shared. So there are several initiatives in which companies are joining forces and sharing information. So they do see collaboration, whether it's amongst competitors or along the supply chain as data moves from, I would say, agriculture to supply ingredient suppliers to manufacturers. It's important to see the ways of collaborating and seeing the whole picture, having a good data set to do predictions on. If I then ask them, do they see this as a must-win opportunity? Is this really how important is this to these companies? I got a resounding yes. This is important to them. They will invest in this, and AI is seen as a main enabler to convert or to convert from the data they're gathering to information, to insights, to getting the heads up on what is happening. I hope that's a practical summary of what we learned in those conversations that we had at our summits.
Giannis, what do you think? What do you hear? Is this relevant to what you're hearing from the people that you're talking to?
Yeah, it is definitely. I hear, and I can confirm that discussing with the food safety leaders to get into the predictive state is indeed something that they have high in their agenda, high in the priorities, even if and they understand that it's not easy to achieve this from one day to another. We need to work on it. We need to collaborate in order to achieve this predictiveness. So I can really relate to that, and I can confirm that this is what we hear as well. As regards the collaboration, it's very, very good, and it's a huge enabler that we are at a non-compete space in the food safety, and this is how all the brands and all the companies are seeing this, and there are a lot of collaborations that have started and they are ongoing, or they have run in the past, but especially for the case of predictiveness, we need more, and we need to build more this data infrastructure that is needed and the software infrastructure that is needed to be able to enable the risk prevention. This sounds very difficult and quite complex. I will say that there are easy things that we can start from that are still very valuable. So they are very advanced things in terms of the predictive state, but there are also basic things that we can add to the current workflows, and we can enable and we can enhance the risk prevention.
So what I hear you describing is that you said, Geert, everyone gave a strong yes as an answer in terms of priority, and that collaboration in such a big problem that is indeed in a non-compete space. We want all of us to ensure that we have safer food, not your customers getting sick and our customers being healthy. So it's a non-compete area. We want to find ways in which we collaborate. And what you're adding, Giannis, is that if we don't pull together the data and the models and the technology that needs to be developed for such a big problem, it's impossible to crack this problem. Now, having said that, and I'm reflecting on that, knowing that it's a little bit outside the core of our conversation, that will be more practical and around use cases. Now, having said that about collaboration, it has the benefits of sharing data, sharing insights and outcomes that are bigger than what I can discover if I look, for example, only in my data set. But it also has the particularity that this data is linked to a liability if something goes wrong. So I also see people being very, very reluctant. And that's one of the key challenges, and most interesting challenges in having this collaboration growing. And I really enjoy the fact that you're having these conversations in your product summits, Geert. This must be very, very interesting conversations. No, I promise to be very practical. So I wanted just to provide a bit of context, of bigger context in our session. But here I have really asked you to focus on actual use cases. Huh? So what we are going to do right now is go through 3 specific use cases. One is looking at the external view of what is happening in the global supply chain, what is happening out there that I need to be aware of, and how is this view of the external food safety landscape getting improved by this kind of technologies. Second, looking at my own system, my own facilities, my production, my manufacturing lines, and how is this changing by this kind of technologies. And third, a use case that is a combination of the internal view and the external view, and it's all around sourcing from suppliers and managing supplier-related risks. So let's kick it off. Giannis, you're the guy to talk about the external risk landscape. Tell us a little bit about this use case and which are the practical applications that you see AI bringing in this kind of scenarios.
Of course. So the main pain point that we hear from the food safety leaders is that they are afraid of unexpected new types of risks that they have not foreseen for their supply chain or dealt with before. And also it may come from geographies they are sourcing from, and they are far away and they cannot be aware of these new risks. So this is the most important pain point that we hear. We hear this from large manufacturers. I have here a typical profile of such manufacturers with thousands of materials and ingredients to manage and assess, with more than 1,000 suppliers that are distributed globally in different regions, with many plants and production facilities in different continents like Europe, Asia, North America, and with large food safety and quality assurance teams, both corporate teams, but also teams that are located in the different regions globally. What we hear that they need is to review geography-specific levels of risks for the countries they source from, and to be able to evaluate the risk profile per geography and country to explore alternative sourcing locations if this is required. So the question that they have is, can technology help us? Can AI help us in this challenge of being afraid of unexpected new risks that may affect my supply chain? So I have a couple of examples of how this can be achieved, starting with the very basic part of having actionable alerts based on the food recalls, border rejections, import refusals, inspection results, controls that have been done at different regions of the world, and delivering this information in a very simple and in a very relevant way to the experts that need to have this information early enough. So having such an alerts that are highlighting which materials and ingredients are affected by emerging risks is something that is very simple as a result, as a delivery. Of course, behind advanced technologies are used to be able to merge the information that can be announced at different regions, the same information, to duplicate the information, to be able to process fast the information, to be able to deliver accurate information, because it's very easy to leave technology, to leave algorithms to do things, and to keep the quality and the accuracy of the data is a challenge. So technologies are used there, but the very simple example of getting alerts is very valuable. so the experts know which are the risks that may affect their supply chain. The other very practical example of how our experts, the experts that we are working with, are using these emerging risks that we are able to identify in the global supply chain is that they are creating monthly emerging risk reports that are used then by the food safety and quality assurance team to design or to adjust a preventive measure like testing program. So this is very typical, very, very important. They are spending a lot of money, a huge investment of running the preventive measures, running the testing programs. So to try to make these testing programs more risk-based is something that helps them very much to be able to become more predictive, to be able to switch from just reacting to a more prevention mode. So they are using this report, they are sharing these reports with their colleagues, with their teams, and this is something that they can use based on what is happening, and they can identify this emerging risk, and they can share the knowledge. Knowledge sharing, we see that knowledge sharing with these so huge organizations is also a very important thing. So everyone have the same picture. In these reports, they also include the forecast of the incident trend for specific hazard and regions. So they can also look for the next month, which are the main trends of hazards and risks for the next month, from which regions we will have more issues, more chemical contaminants, more biological issues. So here is a very clear example of how AI can be used to forecast the potential hazards in the supply chain, in their supply chain. And a very important parameter is how this forecast can be specific for geographies, from which they are getting the materials and the ingredients that are used then to produce the products. So having all this forecast being reflected also in terms of trends on a map like that, and highlighting which are the regions for which we will have more incidents for this specific issue, for this specific ingredient, is a very practical example of how all these underlying algorithms and technology can be reflected in something that is easy to use in order to make a very important decision for risk prevention. So I think that these are the main use cases regarding the mitigating risk, regarding the using the external risk for mitigating these risks. What do you think, Geert?
I agree, Giannis, on what you just said on let's say the outside world and what is coming to the various food and beverage manufacturers. What you just mentioned it reminded me of one of the contributions that was made in one of the predictive panels, panel that I was referring to, where one person said, all that information that is out there, you refer to border controls and so forth, simply knowing that it's out there and knowing whether it could affect me is already a large added value. My organization doesn't have the ability to look constantly in the wider world to see what could be potentially affect me. And therefore, some of the AI algorithms that you just mentioned can really help to highlight what is important and what could potentially affect a manufacturer because of something that happened maybe at the other side of the world to somebody else. But nevertheless, that particular manufacturing could be affected next. So I think there's a lot of value in collecting all the data, understanding what it means, and as you mentioned, reporting that into your customers. I think that is what I also hear from the customers you speak to. They're really looking at a combination of external data, like what Agroknow provides, as well as their own data. They still do a lot of inbound analysis, get a lot of analytics, and they try to make sense of all that data. I think it's also fair to say that currently most companies still do a lot of expert analysis on that data. And I think that is still very valuable with expert analysis, making assessments, and then cascading that information, often manually through the organization. Manually, I mean, by updating spreadsheets, by sending out emails or stuff like that. I think what I see in the industry is that it is, and Nikos, you touched upon that as well, it's still very disjointed systems that are hard to connect. And I think what we're trying to build, and we'll touch upon it a little bit later as well, is to really try to create a digital pipeline, if you will, but connecting systems so that you can really get to a more agile state where information provided or information about emerging hazards or changing hazard risk can flow through and go into HACCP plans, as you refer to that as well, Giannis, and highlight to the people in the factories where their HACCP plan might need a review or an update because their assumptions they're making when they created that HACCP plan have changed. And again, helps them to be agile and lean. And those are the two words that one of our customers, Nestle, used as describing what they're after in creating a food safety system that can be fed in real time with information from the outside. So, yeah.
What I find really fascinating about this use case, because what you're describing is a use case that heavily relies in public sector information, and access to this information, access to the infrastructure that maintains this information is by definition difficult because, first of all, we look at public sector entities all around the world, different countries, different ways in which they are supporting the publication and announcement of this information, different formats, different languages, different hosting facilities. And second, this is information that is not there forever. It might change tomorrow. The website may change and then this data is gone. Or it is stored in a file that someone is publishing. And the import alert that you're looking for one of your suppliers is not available in an easy way for someone to discover. It's really hidden somewhere. So having the technologies at hand to help us unlock and bring this data in the surface and then keep this in the memory of an aggregating solution really relies upon this kind of technologies. Okay, so that's what's happening with the outside world. What about the inside world? Let's go to use case number 2. How does this look like in such a use case, Geert?
Yeah, I think with inside, let's say, the manufacturing environments of F&B companies, including some of our customers, I think I had several conversations on how they want to see risk and understand risks that they're exposed to. And I see several of our, let's say, the industry leaders trying to develop methodologies to identify risks of the individual factories that are in their company, to understand what are the risks for having a food safety incident, for something going wrong that could affect the products that they are producing. That's a long journey. It starts with gathering, and I see several of our customers making strides there, gathering data. It starts, of course, with data and quality of the data. And one of the first things they struggle with is a lot of data is in different systems. And bringing that together becomes then often manual work and often just a one-time off. You can do it once, twice to show proof of concept, but it doesn't scale. You want to have systems that can extract all the data and analyze it. And bringing that all together in one platform, as we would provide helps that process. It helps the collection of the data, it helps the structuring of the data, it helps providing the right context. You see industry leaders having some experience in bringing audit findings, non-conformances, analytical finished product results, inbound COA results all together, and using that environmental monitoring, other indicators, maybe more traditional indicators of food safety status together and do some kind of risk assessment. I think what I'm hearing is that they started to realize that all of those data points are valid, but often lead to more lagging indicators. These are data points of stuff that has already happened and makes insightful stuff, but doesn't give them the edge up, doesn't give them the insight of what is coming. So I see industry leaders looking at what other pieces of data do I need to start looking at to be more aware of what they happen. So maybe you want to move to the next slide. So they're really looking more for data that can help them get to more leading indicators. And some of the conversation that I have with the industry indicates to, I would say, non-classical quality data, but it is like absenteeism, number of changeovers in the factory, indicators of maybe stress in the manufacturing environment. Because in the end, there's still a lot of human operations happening. And if you can get a sense of what is happening in that manufacturing environment from a, I would say, stress point of view, that people are more prone to making mistakes, not by intent, but because of their level of things they need to do. And you can look at training records and so on, and turnover. That is what industry leaders are looking for, and combining that with maybe more traditional quality data to get more predictive in the risk of their manufacturing environments making mistakes. Now, again, that brings some challenges with regard to how do you get all the data together? Where do you bring that together? How is that data of high quality? But if I would summarize what I see our industry leaders do is getting a holistic set of data to apply analytical predictive models to get not just lagging indicators, but more and more leading indicators.
Jens, what do you think?
I could not agree more on the challenges part. So I will share some thoughts about both what we also see in terms of the will, but also what we see and some stories about the challenges that highlights and emphasize some of the things that Geert is describing. So yeah, we also see the will of the food safety leaders, but also all the experts that are working the food safety and quality assurance teams to digitize and automate the process, a heavy process like the one of the risk assessment. They understand very well the complexity, and this is good. They know that this is not a one-off exercise. One-off exercise is something that is done for many years. So they know that switching to a more dynamic risk assessment, to a more live risk assessment, taking into account all the data collection, is something that it needs hard work, it needs alignment, collaboration, and a lot of will. So I can confirm that. I can also confirm from on the side of the challenges that the collection and the integration, even of the internal data, it's not an easy thing to do. So I will only describe, I will share two stories. The one story, real story, is that even if we focus on specific types of information, like the laboratory testing data, and we have a huge organization with many laboratory information management systems in different countries, different systems, different software systems, different descriptors being used to describe laboratory testing results, different languages being used to describe laboratory testing results. It sounds not so, it sounds funny, but because these are mainly data, but still the descriptors are text. So we see that in each country we have different languages. So this is only for a specific type of information. It's only one for the many types of information that someone can use to automate risk assessment, as Geert mentioned. Only for one type of information. If you want to integrate information for 20, 30 different systems inside an organization, is a huge project. And the second story about the combining, about how we can combine all this data, because we still live at the data silos world right now. So the second story is that I have several times the discussion and the question that, Giannis, we have made a huge investment of setting up a data lake, of putting everything, all the data stores together on a very nice cloud infrastructure. But when we make the query and when we try to build analytics, they are not the right analytics. And the answer is always the same. They are not the right analytics. They are not the correct analytics because the underlying data may be of the same infrastructure, even if this is virtual, but they are not linked because no data standards have been used for foods classification, for hazards classification, even for regions classification. So there is a lot of work to be done on the data standardization part. And if you go to the part of the companies' names and the businesses to create an authority file for businesses, you may find the same business with 10 or 20 different variations of the name and incomplete data. So it's a lot of work to be done there. So I explaining them that it's only one part to set up the infrastructure, but there is also a lot of work to be done at the level, at the layer of connecting the data, of combining this data. Both the external ones, the internal ones, and all together.
What I hear you describing, it somewhat sounds so much similar to what we were describing in the previous use case, that for such technologies to work, the data infrastructure piece needs to be resolved. And you would imagine that something like this is not a problem in a food manufacturing environment, but I hear you describing that it is a problem, and it is a very difficult problem, making sure that all the different systems and databases, they can talk to each other and they can create a harmonized view. Because at the end of the day, it's not the core business of a food manufacturer to do this kind of data harmonization. And Geert, you said, let us not forget, and we very often forget, and very often our clients are forgetting, that this is not an exercise that we do for the sake of data integration. We have to keep in mind that the leading indicators, the things that we want to calculate for the future, that want to show us ahead what's coming up, is the important piece of predictive. It's very easy to get lost in the complexity and the difficult challenges that have to do with getting the data there. And we shouldn't forget that the really critical part is about deciding what do we need these systems to be calculating looking ahead. That's interesting, huh? So let's try to put these things together in one of the use cases that are combining the internal view with the external view. And I really like the scenarios that are around suppliers, because these are the businesses from where a large organization is sourcing. They might be domestic or foreign all over the world with lots of uncertainty. They are changing. There are relationships that are changing with the same suppliers because something is happening and we have to manage the relationship and the performance of the particular relationship, or they are changing because I have to switch from one supplier to another, from one geography to another. So it's quite a complex scenario here. What do you have to say about this kind of use case? Giannis, you want to start?
Nikos, you are describing very well the pain point, which is the pain point of the companies, that they have several incidents, usually that they come at the upstream. And this has to do with risks that may be related with the materials and ingredients that are used by the suppliers. And they have so much data, both internally and externally, but they still need a solution that on the one side they can use to early identify emerging risks for their suppliers from the external world and combine them with the internal data. And they need it in a way, they need it in dashboards that can also forecast the likelihood of having these risks. And all this information should be linked with the suppliers, so both the external and the internal information, and the different parameters that you need to assess a supplier need to be linked and combined to estimate a risk level for the supplier. So I have two or three examples, very specific examples that I can share for that. The first thing is that if we manage to combine all the external risk information, we can have dynamic risk assessment profiles for the suppliers that our clients are using. And these profiles are combining data from that are published by the authorities, data about non-compliances, recalls, border rejections, inspections, warning letters. And based on this risk profile, they can prioritize the effort and reduce the frequency of audits for low-risk suppliers and increase the audits for high-risk suppliers. And until now, they are doing this in a very, very manual way. So a lot of effort is needed to do this kind of an assessment per supplier, for each supplier. Imagine when you have thousands of suppliers. So this is the one example. The second example is how the forecast can be also included in the profile of each supplier. So the experts are also notified about potential hazards based on the forecasting results. And this allows them to have a proactive communication and in this way activate very early the preventive measures. So these are dashboards that are highlighting which of the suppliers are on, for which suppliers we have forecasted risks and which are the specific forecasted risks based on the ingredients and materials that they are getting from the suppliers. And then if we are able, and here is the very powerful part, if we are able to combine all these different parameters about the material risks, about the forecasted risks, the internal data that they have for audit performance, for reports from the audits, laboratory testing results, certificates of analysis, and we can combine all this information, then the companies and our clients are able to prioritize, to estimate an overall risk score and prioritize the suppliers and prioritize also the preventive measures for the suppliers, like for instance, to design a very good plan of audits that will focus on the ones that are at high risk and less on the ones at low risk. So these are just three examples of how the technology is used right now in a simple way, but a valuable way to be able to enable this predictiveness, and how the combination of internal with external data can make it even more powerful.
Geert, what would you add in such a use case, or what would be your view in such a...
So first of all, I would say that I agree with what Giannis is saying, that this is a very important topic for the companies I speak to. And I like what Giannis is saying about combining external with internal data. It was one of the motivations of having a collaboration between Agroknow and Veeva, is to bring that data together, but also to bring in a quality management system the foresight that a platform like Agroknow can bring about what is happening in the supply of a food manufacturer. The food industry probably operates one of the most complex and worldwide supply chains that there are in the world, which is also at the same time very dynamic because of seasonality, because of the agricultural origin of its materials, and that in itself brings with it a lot of complexities. And again, I believe that what Agroknow is doing really brings a lot of value to manufacturers, to give that foresight, that insight of what is happening in the world with regard to food safety risks. And I believe that in the future, we want to have that pipeline of digital information, that pipeline of digital risk information going from solutions that are platforms that provide the outside world into a manufacturer's environment, because in the end, the manufacturer needs to keep up the trust with the consumer. They absorb, they need to take responsibility for everything that happens upstream of their supply chain. And so really these kind of predictive tools really give them the time to respond, as I see it, to give them the heads up, do something to prevent it happening in with their suppliers, changing from one supplier to the other, for example, or doing extra audits, extra inbound checks. And then really, therefore, systems that you can trigger notification, that can provide alerts of meaningful alerts, really helps food manufacturers to manage their food safety risk. That is a real belief of mine, and driving for me the reason why we collaborate and why we want to see that data flow across the supply chain. Yeah.
It's very interesting what I hear you describing, that integration and flow of data is key for this kind of scenarios. And what I hear you describing, Geert, is that this external risk view, for example, when it comes in the systems that people are using internally, and it enhances the view that they have of a supplier, incorporating also the forecasting goodies that Giannis was describing, then it's valuable. And I will reverse this flow, and I will also think out loud about scenarios in which the trends that are being collected within our organization are added and are aggregated with the external risk trends. Then they make the view of what is happening worldwide even stronger. Huh? So this kind of flow of data, it's very, very powerful.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, I will only keep one question for you guys. I'm having the time in mind. We are running a little bit, something like 5 minutes longer, but I really enjoy the conversation. I would like to ask you one thing that is one of, I think, the most popular questions that I hear throughout these years. Can you give us a real example of a crisis that you believe could have been prevented if such a technology was put in place? Can you think of one really practical recall case that you think that we could have prevented with the things that we were describing today? Who would like to start?
I can start. Yeah, I'm trying to select one that is, simple to understand, or it's something that we can all remember. So I will take one of the latest crises that we had with the lead in the cinnamon, in the apple juice that was used. And we had several reports about it. So the issue of lead in cinnamon was not something that was very new at that point. It was something that was already reported, and the frequency of reporting the lead in herbs was increasing during the last months before this happened. So this is, if you have, for instance, a supplier for cinnamon, either this is from different from Asia or from other regions, and you know that this is something that you need to check in your products, and you need to communicate proactively with the supplier to address this issue. I think that we could prevent this so many recalls and such an impact on the public health, especially for a very sensitive group like kids.
Okay. Geert, any examples?
Well, yeah, I was speaking also recently to another customer, and again, also the issue of allergens contamination in raw materials, in spices, for example, came up there. And of course, there have been some real problems around peanut contamination from, for example, India. But also from other countries. So I would say that those kind of things with better alerts, a better understanding of how those ingredients make their way into the supply chain are probably where predictive measures can really help to prevent those from happening. So yeah, I think Giannis' example is strong, and I think there are other like allergens where this could also really help. Yeah.
Thank you for these examples. Let's move to the conclusion. I have some thoughts in this closing part, a couple of thoughts that I would like to share with you, and then ask for your wrap up. First of all, this is one of my favorite diagrams. It's the technology adoption curve that talks about the way in which innovations are being adopted and used by people. And what I find fascinating in this diagram is that it is talking about the gap that exists between the early adopters, the ones that are fans of any technological innovation, or the ones that are visionary and will trust and will adopt an innovation, even if it's not working well enough, and then the actual majority of people that are using this. And I think that one of the questions that are very interesting to answer, or I find fascinating, is where do we stand today in terms of this chasm, this gap with AI technologies? I wonder, are we still at the visionary space and the chasm is ahead and we have to find a way to cross it? Or have we already crossed it and we are actually seeing a practical adoption? That's one thing. And the second thing I would like to put on the table is it's one of my favorite and oldest use cases. There are companies, so this is a company that everybody knows, Amazon, and they were describing in the panel of 2021 already how they are using algorithms to assess the safety of products that are available online in the online shops, and the algorithm is deciding automatically on whether they will put a product off the shelf. It doesn't trigger a human to take the decision, but it does take the decision on its own. And I wonder, for example, in the scenarios of supplier risk assessment that you were describing, what if the algorithm actually took the decision to remove one of the suppliers automatically and stop doing business with the supplier because the risk score is predicted to be high in the months to come? This is the kind of automation that would be interesting to see if we will arrive to eventually. Yeah? And I think that behind this, what I'm talking about is a matter of trust. How much do we trust these technologies? And how much do we trust them in decisions that are significantly affecting the health of consumers? And they are also significantly affecting the potential damage of a brand. They may have a tremendous economic impact, either by taking a wrong decision and investing lots of resources in preventing something that never happens, or by overlooking something that hits the supply chain and leads to a costly recall. So how much can we trust? And to which extent? Are we going to ever fully automate some of these decisions? This is an open question. My dear panelists, it was a pleasure to have you in this session. I want your final thoughts. I want your final reflection from the things that we covered today. What do you keep as the most important conclusion, or the key message that you would like our audience to keep in mind? Geert, would you like to start?
Yeah, my one thing is start doing it. Start this journey, but be pragmatic. To your point of the crossing the chasm, start with things that gives you a return of investment rather quickly. But start learning, because this is a journey and it will take time. But I do think the benefits of it will be significant. And if you don't know how to use it, I think you will fall behind rather quickly.
What about you, Giannis?
I realize from the discussion, from the very interesting discussion that we had today, I realize that this is a journey, that it's not only for one company or for a couple of companies. And I'm talking first of all from the technology point of view. So I realize that the workflows that we need to support and for which we need to create impact are so serious, so important, because they help us to have safe food, that we need to integrate also the solutions. We need to integrate the software, because in many times I'm referring to the integration of data, to the data silos, but I see that if we have software silos, we will not be able to serve and help and support the food safety and quality assurance experts.
So what I hear you describing, or at least what I'm thinking with listening to your conclusions, is that you refer to food safety as a non-compete space when we started, and that's so true. But what I hear you referring to right now is that maybe we should start considering food safety software solutions as well, at least in some areas, as a non-compete space, because we cannot afford to be competing in this space. We have to find the ways in which data will flow and solutions will complement each other. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation today. Thank you so much to the people that have watched us live. for over 60 minutes. We're close to 70 minutes already. It was a pleasure. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to have this conversation also in a live setting.
Very much so.
Thank you. Looking forward.
Thank you. Bye-bye to everyone.
Bye-bye.